Welcome to Understanding Chord Symbols. I'm dedicating this to all my classically trained friends and acquaintances who never were introduced to chord symbols during their studies at the conservatory. Interestingly, anything Bach ever wrote harmony-wise can be notated using chord symbols. The example I'll be using is associated with the F chord and its logical extensions. Please work with all the 11 other chord symbols related to their scales. I'll be only showing the construction of the harmony based on the chord symbol itself and in root position. Therefore, I will not be discussing things like the psychology behind the chord choice, how they're used, inversions, or various substitute voicings that could be used, since all that and more have been covered in previous tutorials that I've posted on the subject. Now, the very first thing you need to understand with chord symbols is that they tend to construct themselves based on their own major scale, with some altered notes thrown in along the way. Because of this, it would appear that the chords come directly from their own scales, with nothing to do with the actual key signature of the song. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. The actual connection is explained fully in my tutorial series Relationship on Primary and Relationship of Secondary Chord Movements. In that series, chord numbers are introduced rather than the chord symbols themselves. So, without further ado, let's get started. Here's my F major chord, based on 1, 3, 5 of the major scale, sometimes referred to as a triad. Notice in the chord symbol, there was no mention that the chord was major, so we can come to a conclusion that everything in popular or contemporary music is considered major unless you're told otherwise. Also, don't forget that we have 12 tones, and each one of these tones represents the root of a chord you should be learning. So don't forget to practice all 12, not just the example F that I'm using. Now, right off the top, let me explain that unfortunately there is no standardization of chord symbols. Publishers tend to be all over the map with their depiction. Numbers after a chord symbol, sometimes separated by slash or commas, refers to the extension of the chord. A letter after slash, by the way, is a little different. It refers to the bass note reference, usually depicting an inversion, such as this symbol, F/C, meaning an F chord with a C in the bass. Makes the chord second inversion. As I've already mentioned, I will not be including inversions in this three-part tutorial. Let's take a look at minor. The F minor chord comes in two forms, F with a small case m, or just a simple F minus. They're both the same. The minor chord is based on the triad with the third flattened half a tone. Just flatten the third, the minor third in the triad makes the chord minor. The F sus chord, S sus 4 or just simply F sus, the sus automatically refers to the 4. Both are the same, used most often on the tonic chord. Yes, the sus chord. Here's my triad. Instead of flattening it to make it minor, I raise the third to the fourth note of the scale, which creates tension. Most likely the chord symbol after that would be telling you to play an F chord, which would tell you to bring that back. The F6, your F triad with an added 6. Our first four-note chord will be the F6, basically our triad with the sixth note added to the triad. So it becomes a four-note chord. So that would be an F6. This would be a D6. F minor 6, small case m or dash 6, F6 made minor. To make an F minor 6, well, it's going to be the triad with the 6, but again I'm going to flatten the third a half tone, and there is a minor 6 chord. Here we have the F7 chord, our first time looking at a dominant chord. An F7 chord. Well, you would think you'd add the actual seventh note to the chord, since that's what we did with the sixth, but not in this case. It's actually a flatted seventh. Easiest way of finding it, of course, is to think of it as a triad, go up to the next root and down a whole tone, and you'll get the 7 every time. This would be an E flat 7 chord, a C7 chord, but we're looking at the F7 chord. Two forms of this: F7 sus4, or simply F7 sus. The sus automatically refers to the fourth, used equally, often used before the 7th chord. An F7 sus chord, well, here we have the F7 chord, the 7th being a whole tone below the root, with the 3rd raised to the 4th, creating that tension. This chord, unlike the F sus chord, which is more than likely a tonic chord, this would be used more like a dominant chord. And most likely, but not necessarily always, it will resolve back to the F7. Here we have the F minor 7th chord. It's a 7th chord made minor. Comes in two forms, small case M or -7. F minor 7 chord, well, there's my major triad, there's the 7th, whole tone below the root. Again, all I have to do is flatten the 3rd a half a tone, and I'm going to get a minor 7th chord. Here we have an F major 7 chord. How I wish we had consistency with the chord symbols. Every publisher seems to have their own take on it. Here are 4 chord symbols exactly meaning the same thing. May come across F MAJ7, F MA7, F capital M7, which I'm not crazy about because that could be confused with a small case M for minor. And this one, hopefully you don't see too often, but F triangle 7, all the same meaning F major 7. Ah, the F major 7 chord, great chord. Here we actually do use the 7th note of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The leading tone to the tonic, we add that to our triad. And that becomes an F major 7. Should point out very quickly that it can be interchanged with a 6. They're both passive chords. So there is an F major 7 chord. F minor with a major 7. Yeah, it does exist. Don't see it too often, but it is certainly used. Yeah, it is possible to have an F minor with a major 7. So here's my F major 7 chord, and I'm going to flatten the 3rd to make it minor. So that would be called an F minor major 7. Used in a song like not used that often, but it's certainly available for us. Yes, the augmented chord divides the octave into equal 3 parts. 4 different symbols to depict it. We've got an F aug 5, or I could just simply say F aug, the 5th is understood. Likewise the same with F plus 5, or if I just have F plus and no other number after it, the plus automatically refers to the 5. All these chord symbols interchangeable. My F augmented chord, here's my F triad. I just raised the 5th a half tone to the sharpened 5. By the way, it is an equal division of the octave, 2 whole tones here, 2 whole tones here, and if I take that up there, because of that fact that it's an equal division of the octave in thirds, more often than not it's just left as a triad. However, a 7th could be added, if you like it. The F diminished 7 chord comes in 4 forms: F diminished and F small circle. No mention of a 7 there at all. These two do have a mention of the 7. F diminished 7 and F small circle 7. Even if the chord symbol does not mention the 7, you try to put it in mainly because it helps complete the picture of an equal division of the octave in 4 parts. That I explain a lot more in detail in my tutorial on the diminished chords themselves and why the diminished 7th looks like a 6. F diminished. Well, here's my F chord. If I flatten the 3rd, it's minor. And if I flatten the 5, it becomes a diminished fifth, which makes that a diminished chord. As I mentioned about the chord symbol, we pretty well want to have the diminished seventh added to it. So we add it here. It looks like a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But we refer to it as a diminished seventh. The half diminished seventh. The circle with a small slash through it indicates the type of seventh that's being used. It's actually a dominant seventh that's being used at that point. This is rather redundant, and I have seen this the odd time, fortunately not too often, because once you put the slash through there, it's already telling the musician which type of seventh to use, so that is really not necessary. Publishers, for the most part, have not really caught on to this, although I think that will change down the road. To get you to play that chord, they're likely to have you read chord symbols left to right. So they say, make it F chord first, then make it minor, add the 7. Oh, and when everything else is done, flatten the 5, or minus a 5. They're all the same. So you tend to read chord symbols left to right. It has nothing to do with any of that, because as soon as you flatten the 5, it is a diminished chord. So publishers will use these two chord symbols to actually tell you to play this chord. The half diminished seventh. Well, there's my F chord, made minor, turn it into diminished by flattening the 5. But instead of adding the diminished seventh, I'm going to be adding the seventh, referred to as a half diminished seventh. In fact, the publishers will get you to play the chord just by telling you it's an F chord, make it minor, add the 7th, well, that's a whole tone below the root, and when everything else is said and done, flatten the 5. Well, of course, as soon as I flatten the 5, it becomes diminished. So that chord is actually a half diminished 7th. Well, that's it for Chord Symbols Explained Part 1. Covered quite a bit today, all of the chords within the octave. Now in Part 2, we're going to look at the extended chords over the octave, and in particular the 9th chord and all its variations. So don't hang back. Come on, follow me up to Part 2. Bye for now.